Afternoon, everyone. It's only 3 hours I've got, Charles, is it? Let's talk about pensions. I've got a few minutes, and for once I feel a bit on terms with some of the investment guys because I can't really talk about what's going to happen post-election. All we can do is hypothesise a little bit. But I think this year I will hypothesise a little bit about what the general election might do for pensions. Hopefully, yeah. Well, I always start any pension talks I do these days with just trying to get a bit of sort of background, and I always go to the Daily Express for my background. I don't know if you know, but the Daily Express, there's a website called Daily Express Bingo, and they have about 5 subjects that they always have headlines based on, and pensions is thankfully one of them. So you can pretty much perm any of these subjects. So you've got pensions, the weather, the royal family, how we don't like Europe, and a couple of others. But generally, I always get my views on what the world's thinking about pensions. And obviously, with an election coming up, this gives us a little bit of a subtle view as to what's happening next. So we get millions hit by pensions rip-off. We didn't get the royal family there, but we got Simon Cowell, which is pretty much the same as that, I think. Pensions crisis has payout slashed, royal family. Now, the first time I've used that slide, someone said, Mike, we're not interested in that. What we're really interested in is Abu Qatada's holiday tip-offs. And I hadn't really spotted that, but now he's travelling a bit more. I think we may find out a little bit more about what he thinks. But pensions crisis has paid, so we get the negative bits, but then we get the positive bits. You know, here we get pensions up boost on the way for millions. That word millions is often there. It's trying to be a big. This is what's happening to the pensions world, and we got the weather as well. But obviously. This year we've seen the advent of pension freedoms and the new rules from the Chancellor, and this was what we got on the day after the budget, pension and savings joy for all. So I think the focus very much up to the election has been about taking money out of pensions. Now, what I want to do is perhaps in a minute just go on to look a little bit further at what some of the manifestos say about what's going to happen with pensions going forwards. So 2015 has been a landmark year for pensions. Firstly, it's the 25th anniversary of SIPS. And that's been obviously quite a positive change to pensions where that happened. Add to that the 20th anniversary of income drawdown, which was the first time people didn't start having to buy an annuity. Add to that the implementation of pension freedoms, which was the emphasis of not having to buy an annuity. And you can see we've had probably a positive year on pensions going forwards. Now the issue for me is what's going to come after the election. I remember the sort of budget last year. George Osborne, let it be clear, no one will have to buy an annuity, which actually wasn't strictly true, because we haven't had to buy an annuity since 2011. So the whole of the new pension freedom regime was based on a bit of a misconception. And this got me into problems, being a pensions geek. Queen's speech came on the TV, legislation saying you don't need to buy an annuity, etc., etc. And I'm shouting at the television, that's not true. Please, that's not true. My wife shouts at me and says, please stop shouting at the television. Apologises to the guests, and we carry on from there. But interestingly, although we've gone through pension freedoms, people don't need to buy an annuity, a lot of the surveys coming out are saying that people want a guaranteed income for life, but they don't want an annuity. So we did conclude we don't need to go for all this, just change the name of annuities. And I would make the point from before as well, I don't buy the Daily Express. I just see the headlines on the way to buy my Daily Mail. Now, I'm pleased with that one, because I did that one the other week in an audience, and there was no one laughed. And I thought, hang on, as I'm getting older, what's a Daily Mail reader look like? Am I turning into one? So we've got freedom and choice in pensions, and I think that's been the positive bit of pensions this year. And I'm not sure the coincidence of what was happening. We've got freedom now in taking money out. As I say, my question is going to be what the manifestos say about putting money in. Now, I must have a Lamborghini, because it is now pensions law that everyone has to mention a Lamborghini in their pension plan. I was at a conference with Steve Webb, the pensions minister, the other week, and he's trying to live down this image as being the Lamborghini sort of minister. And I think one of the pensions newspapers did a survey of Lamborghini dealerships post 6th of April this year to see if anyone had bought one, and I don't think anyone had yet. So we're still in that confidence stage, I think. But let's get on to the election. I think one of the things is that this year the election hasn't focused. There's been a number of people discussing it hasn't really focused on pensions too much. I think pensions have been a little bit sidelined. I think there's been lots of other subjects. I've sort of called it it shows my age guess, the Jimmy Cricket sort of budget. Each time you think it's finished, it's and there's more. And So what we've got, because everyone's focusing, I think, for the pension freedoms of taking your money out, I think that's, I'd like to say, enshrined in legislation for good. The Labour Party have said they will look at it and review it to make sure it's working properly. Now, I'm hoping that as the cat's out of the bag, it's very difficult to put a cat back into the bag again. So I think the focus very much is not so much on taking money out. The focus on what will get changed following the election is going to be on putting money in. The general consensus seems to be that higher rate tax relief will be restricted or disappear totally. And I think if you look at the numbers, you know, the Chancellor spends something like £30 billion a year on tax relief, on high rate tax relief. And there is that general feeling that it's targeted at the wrong people. So what we've got from the Conservatives, the Labour Party and the Lib Dems are three particular proposals. Conservatives have suggested a restriction of the annual allowance for anyone earning between 150,000 and 210,000. And let's bear in mind the annual allowance today is £40,000. You can put £40,000 into your pension scheme and get full tax relief on it. That between 150 and 210, you'll lose 50p of your allowance for each pound of savings. So in theory, and it's only a limited number of people to some extent, if you're earning over £210,000, then your annual allowance will come down to £10,000 a year. That seems a little bit low, perhaps, but generally I think that's the proposal. The IFS have said 300,000 people will be affected. Labour Party, slightly more of a cliff edge. They've gone for tax relief, 20% for those earning above £150,000. So generally, I mean, we sort of haven't come out of it too badly with proposals to restrict the additional tax rate for tax relief. Now, some of this, I think, comes back to a fundamental understanding of what pensions tax relief is all about. You know, is it an incentive to save, or is it to avoid paying tax on your income twice? You know, we all know that pensions are pay, and there's European court cases that show pensions are pay. So the pension saving is you deferring your pay. So should you be deferring that pay from tax until you take it out as benefit, on which then you're taxed? I think there's a bit of a philosophical issue as to whether the sort of pensions tax relief should be based on just making sure you pay tax on earnings once. Lib Dems, they've come out with the most interesting, I think, proposal, but I'm not sure if it matters too much. They've come out with their flat rate tax relief, the idea of changing from 40 or 45% tax relief. Across the board, they've come out with something like a 30 or a 33% flat rate of tax relief, which sort of makes sense. They've also suggested perhaps doing away with the ubiquitous lifetime allowance. I think if you allied a flat rate of tax relief at, say, 30% or so, 33%, with a removal of the lifetime allowance, then with some of the attraction, I guess, of the new death benefit rules and the ability to cascade pensions down the generations, that might look quite attractive. Other bits and pieces around the edges, obviously the Lib Dems have pushed the fact that the triple lock on state pensions will stay. There's been little else. UKIP have suggested perhaps more money to be spent on PensionWise, which is this new advisory service for people retiring, and this idea perhaps of giving people vouchers to give them some access to tax relief. Now, I'm not sure about the vouchers sort of idea. What do you say? You say everyone's entitled to a voucher of £250 a year to go and get some advice. Yeah, over here, you have one financial advisor who charges out at £10 an hour, so you get quite a lot of his time. Over here, you've got an advisor that charges out at £500 an hour. You get half an hour of his time. Who's going to give you the best advice? So I'm not sure the voucher idea, but the idea from UKIP that comes through which is much more of take it out of the industry and give people a bit more guidance, retirement seminars, retirement sessions. So that doesn't seem to be too bad an idea. But other than that, we've generally had not much mention about pensions in the election. Now, what annoys me most, I guess, is the Conservatives. Their restriction on pensions tax relief has been based around using it to fund the inheritance tax, £1 million for the family house. The Labour Party are using their take to reduce tuition fees from 9,000 to 6,000. And it disappoints me that pensions should be a bigger subject than this. It's not about hypothecating short-term, small policies. It should be about looking at the big picture. What we should be doing is projecting forwards 20 or 30 years, looking at the big maths rather than the small maths, looking at the demographics of the state, looking at how many replacements there are, how many pensioners there are, how many people are paying tax to fund each pensioner, and we should be looking to encourage people to make savings. And I'm always wary of the changes to tax relief just sort of tinker around the edges. I think the lifetime allowance does that, changes to high rate tax relief, people will sort of shy away from pensions. So I think we're missing a trick to some extent. We should be focusing on the long-term plans rather than short-term each election. That's my opinion on that. Here's a headline I got from the Sunday Times, which did make me wonder if they'd gone ahead with this in their manifesto, then they may actually have they may have got more votes. I'm not sure totally where that came from, but it just, as a collection of pensions ephemera to some extent, that just struck me as being quite a nice headline. It'd be interesting to throw it back to the Lib Dems and see what they thought about that. So really, the 2015 budget, I mean, the reduction in the annual allowance to £1 million, indexation of that, lifetime allowance to £1 million, indexation of that in 2 years' time, might be the best that we can get. And I still think there is a bit of an argument that it will take some time to change high rate tax relief. And I do think there's perhaps a little bit of a planning opportunity for people to be making contributions to maximise their high rate tax relief while you can. Other bits that have been silent, well, there's always been scare stories about the tax-free lump sum for pensions. Not heard too much of that. Gordon Brown said it was safe in his hands. Thank you. So I'm never quite sure on that. I mean, that always scares people a little bit. But in the way of pensions legislation has changed over the years, we've always treated those benefits that have been accrued and had transitional arrangements. So it would only be perhaps on future benefits. So I'm not so worried about that one. But I think the danger is the tinkering around the edges. Too much tinkering makes pensions complicated and makes people shy away from doing pensions. So I'm looking forward to Thursday, more to Friday and the days after, to see what actually comes through. And the more you observe politics, the more you've got to admit that each party is worse than the other. So whether or not it's going to stir up the pensions world, I hope it will. But it's not just pensions these days, it's retirement. So you can interlink it into this sort of IHT, income tax. And for me, it's not about pension planning anymore, it's about retirement planning. And retirement planning is all your assets together, be it your house, your ISAs, your mortgage, your debt, your pensions, and trying to put those all into some sort of plan and hierarchy that makes them most efficient to take out. And I think with the death benefit changes, there are some big opportunities to cascade wealth down the generations. So that was the Daily Mail on the day after the budget last year. Pension power to the people. So hopefully the people do have a bit more power. And first signs seem to be not everyone's rushing to take all their money out of their pension. People are thinking about it. The general consensus I've spoken to is that a lot of people with smaller sums of money are taking out of pensions. And Steve Webb even said the utility of someone taking out, understand the tax implications and understand the sort of pension scams, the phone calls offering free pension reviews. So that's the positive bit of this year. I'm just hoping that the election doesn't go ahead and spoil what's been a positive year so far. Thank you very much for your time.